give my love for thee.
Amen. Well, good morning to us, everyone, and welcome to those online. We're going to get started right now. We've been having some weather challenges, which caused us to delay our programming, but the rain has tapered off a little, and we will open with prayer. Let's pray. Our loving Father in heaven, we thank you for this, the last great day of the solemn feast, and we come now to feast upon your word. We thank you for your love, your mercies, and your grace. Pray you bless the audio and the video presentation here, and bless your people who are waiting upon your word. Bless the speaker, and may our hearts be lifted to the throne of God. Prepare us for the things that are coming upon the earth and the things that are here, that we might be fortified and be that people that will stand the last great test and triumph at last with the Lamb on Mount Zion. Into your hands we commit this meeting now and commit ourselves, and we thank you. In Emmanuel's name, Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen. All right, a pleasant good morning again, everyone. And we are going to look on a continuation of a study we started, a study series we started some time ago called The Dragon's Roar. This is part 13 of The Dragon's Roar. And we'll subtitle this Laudato Si. COP26 and common good. And hopefully our audio and video will be stable. I'm noticing it weaving in and out. So let's start with Daniel chapter 1. Daniel chapter 1 verses 3 through 8, the Bible says, And the king spake unto Ashpenaz, the master of the eunuchs, that he should bring certain of the children of Israel, and of the king's seed, and of the princes, the children in whom was no blemish, but well favored and skillful in all wisdom, and cunning in knowledge, and understanding science, and such as had ability in them to stand in the king's palace, and whom they might teach the learning and the tongue of the Chaldeans. And the king appointed them a daily provision of the king's meat and of the wine which he drank, so nourishing them 3 years, that at the end thereof they might stand before the king. Sorry. That they might stand before the king. Verse 6. Now among these were of the children of Judah Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. But Daniel, verse 8, but Daniel purposed in his heart that he would not defile himself with the portion of the king's meat, nor with the wine which he drank. Therefore he requested of the prince of the eunuchs that he might not defile himself. This is the word of the Lord, and we pray the Lord's blessing to the reading, the hearing, the understanding, and the executing of these his holy words. Now what we are seeing here is Israel taken into Babylon in captivity. And they were being tried along various lines. And we're informed through inspiration that the test that the people of God confronted in Babylon will be duplicated against God's people in the last days. Now, it is a common thing to hear in Seventh-day Adventist media space that the vaccine is not the mark of the beast system. And you've heard from this platform repeatedly that while it is not the mark of the beast system, it lays at the bedrock, at the foundation of the formation of that system. It is not the worship component, but it is a part of the test of character that will determine how we will decide at that time. Now, Daniel and his companions, verse 8 tells us that they had already purposed in their heart that they would not defile themselves with a portion of the king's meat. So before chapter 3, when the fire furnace experience came up, in chapter 6 with Daniel in the lion's den, we had a test on health. They had to deal with the quality of health care that they received from Babylon versus that which was espoused and expounded in the Torah. And they purposed in their hearts ahead of time that they would not defile their body temples. And so today, we are confronting a health test as Christians, as present truth believers. We are confronted with a challenge of our health as to whether or not we will defile our bodies with the king's portion. These are government portions, government mandates. Daniel was confronted with such a test. And after that, then came the worship component of bowing down to the image. And so many today are waiting to see the bowing down part to the image before they stand in opposition. But by that time, all defenses are broken down. It's too late. Satan is cunning. He's a student of the scriptures. And if we're not students of the scriptures, we will be overtaken in this kidnapping bag. So there was a health test that Daniel and his companions had to meet. That's in chapter 1. Then later on, we see the religious test, whether or not they will bow down and worship the image, even the image of the beast. We today are confronted with such a test. And we should learn the lesson from Daniel. Now there is a rival to the third angel's message out there, and I brought this to our attention recently, and I want to recast this in this context again. Revelation 14, we'll take 6 through 9. And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach unto them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people. That means the earth's inhabitants. Saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made heaven and earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. Now you're going to see the wine of Babylon come up again. Verse 8, there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. The third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man will worship the beast, if any man worship the beast in his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink, verse 10, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. So here we have a decision point. The everlasting gospel to be preached to every nation, every kindred, every tongue, every people. It's the earth's inhabitants. And it's calling attention to fear Yahweh, to fear God, to reverence him, and give glory to him, because the judgment hour is come. Now, those who preceded us and preached the message, even in 1929, could not give the distinguishing feature of the message we can proclaim today. They could only present this as events yet to come. And so they were giving a fainter cry to the third angel's message. But today, the context is right in front of us. It's right upon us. And we have to help people to understand the forces in conflict and the stand that they should, in the fear of God, take. Now, we will not force anyone's conscience and say, you may not do this and do that, but we simply admonish them along the lines of Scripture. This is the most fearful and solemn message born to mankind. It is a message to be given to every living being upon this planet. And would you not know that Satan has crafted a very similar message with opposite intent, and God has warned us against it. If any man worship the beast in his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. So try to appreciate what the first angel said very clearly in verse 7. Fear God. In fact, in verse 6, he had the everlasting gospel to preach to all the inhabitants of the earth, every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. And it is to call reverence or fear to the Creator. It draws attention, verse 7 now, the last clause, and worship him that made, watch now, heaven and earth. Let me bring up my marker here. I can find it. Heaven and earth, the sea, and the fountains of waters. Somehow I can't locate it. Are you seeing it on my screen? Okay, here it comes. I think I see it now. Yeah, so notice something else. It calls attention to the Creator of heaven, earth, the sea, fountains of waters. These happen to be the areas of interest to climate change activists. In particular, the areas of interest of the Pope and his Laudato Si encyclical on climate change. So it's nature or the planet and its people. And we showed that before. Notice that in verse 6, where it calls attention to earth's inhabitants, every nation, kindred, tongue, and people, and then attention to the Creator of the universe. So climate change is focused on two distinct entities, planet and people. God's third angel's message is also focused on these two areas. And let me show you now the rival to the third angel's message. Here's Pope Francis in his Laudato Si encyclical. In paragraph 3, he says, now faced as we are with global environmental deterioration, I wish to address, watch now, every person living on this planet. That's every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. What's the broadness of his message? Let's see. In my apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium, I wrote to all the members of the church with the aim of encouraging ongoing missionary renewal. In this encyclical, though, I would like to enter into dialogue with all people about our common home. Do you see the two entities? People and planet, or planet and people. All people about the planet, or common home. We see this as the architecture of the framing of Revelation 13, verses 11 and 12. In particular, verse 12, where it says that the two-horned beast will cause the earth and them which dwell therein to worship. The earth and its inhabitants will worship the healed beast. And the Pope, in his encyclical, is giving the same message, calling attention to people, all people, and planet, every person living upon the planet. So when you see these vaccine mandates, they will extend to every person living upon the planet. And then, in addition to that, we have climate mandates coming up. After COP26, there'll be climate mandates affecting every sector of our lives. On page 7, paragraph 71, and I shared this in previous discussions, it says, although the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and the Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth, nonetheless, through Noah, who remained innocent and just, God decided to open a path of salvation. This sounds very, you could have found this in Patriarchs and Prophets or any of Sister White's writings dealing with the early centuries. All it takes is one good person to restore hope, the Pope says. The biblical tradition early shows that this renewal entails recovering and respecting the rhythms inscribed in nature by the hand of the Creator. We see this, for example, in the law of the Sabbath. Now, he very quickly hones in on the law of the Sabbath. And so Seventh-day Adventists are only focused on the weekly day of rest and think that is the law of the Sabbath. That is not the law of the Sabbath. The law of the Sabbath entails much more than the weekly Sabbath day. It's all the statutes, judgments, commandments of God. All the worship statutes surround the law of the Sabbath. So when we think of Passover, for example, that's an aspect of the law of the Sabbath. These are the Sabbaths or the feasts of Yahweh. So this is, he goes on to say, we see this, for example, in the law of the Sabbath. On the seventh day, God rested from all his work. Watch how he extended the law of the Sabbath now. He commanded Israel to set aside each seventh day as a day of rest, a Sabbath. He gave various Bible references. Similarly, under the law of the Sabbath, every 7 years, a sabbatical year was set aside for Israel, a complete rest for the land. You see how quickly he came to the land? We have land and people here. Planet and people are brought to focus in this law of the Sabbath. Similarly, every 7 years, a sabbatical year was set aside for Israel, a complete rest for the land. Leviticus 25, 1-4. When sowing was forbidden and one reaped only what was necessary to live on and to feed one's household. So the papacy is very clear that the law of the Sabbath involves much more than the weekly seventh-day Sabbath. And we need to be aware of this. And you know, there are many Adventist present truth ministries who read through and teach about Laudato Si, but they've never focused in this paragraph. Never, ever. Because their eyes too are blinded to the truth of the law of the Sabbath. They can find Sunday under every leaf. They can show you where the Pope has Sunday written down, but they can't see this part about the law of the Sabbath because they believe that these things were nailed to the cross. The pontiff continues. Finally, after 7 weeks of years, the law of the Sabbath, we're still discussing here, after 7 weeks of years, which is to say 49 years, the Jubilee was celebrated as a year of general forgiveness and liberty throughout the land for all its inhabitants. This law, the law of the Sabbath, this law came about as an attempt to ensure balance and fairness in their relationships with others and with the land on which they live and work. Do you see others and the land? This is a principle. Others are people, the land, planet. So you see this constant dance, this continuous relationship in the popes and the climatologists' focus. And that's the focus of Revelation 13, verse 12. He causes the earth and its inhabitants to worship. And the earth, now we can see the Pope knows how the earth worships. The land worships, so the people keep the Sabbath. And the law of the Sabbath is what causes the land and the earth to worship. And we recall, even in Leviticus, where it says, the Lord will drive them off the land so that it will keep its Sabbath. And in Chronicles, it says he drove them out for 70 years so that the land could celebrate their Sabbaths. So my word to every Seventh-day Adventist is to be aware that the law of the Sabbath entails more than the weekly seventh day. We are so latched onto focusing on the weekly seventh day that we're not realizing that the law of the Sabbath is much bigger than that. And God has bigger things in store that he wants to teach us. So now the pontiff continues. At the same time, it was an acknowledgement that the gift of the earth with its fruits belongs to everyone. Now you understand why borders are torn down and everyone is just, it's a big soup, social pact. Those who tilled and kept the land were obliged to share its fruits, especially with the poor, with widows, orphans, and foreigners in their midst. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field to its very border, neither shall you gather the gleanings after the harvest, and you shall not strip your vineyard there, neither shall you gather the fallen grapes of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner. So in this way, care for the planet and the poor, a signature feature of this Laudato Si encyclical. But it cannot be overemphasized that the law of the Sabbath involves more than the weekly seventh day. And so this is where Seventh-day Adventists will now join with the papacy, because it is not promoting a Sunday law. They say there's no Sunday law in the pipeline. The things they're talking about are nailed to the cross. These are long ago things. So it's okay to care for the planet, care for our common home, and join with them. It's a good cause, a worthy cause. This is what the devil would have us to think. And then on paragraph 7 to 9, he says, the work of the church seeks not only to remind everyone of the duty to care for nature, but at the same time, she must, above all, protect mankind from self-destruction. Now, when you see nature, you will see planet. Nature is a planet, and mankind is people. So we're coming right back to this is a constant theme of the Pope's focus. And this is a theme of Revelation 13. Let's not forget that. So we can see that the two-horned beast is to carry out the career of the healed beast. And so the Pope is writing the inspirational material, the inspirational manuscript that the two-horned beast will use to enforce worship decrees that will pay homage to the papacy. The Vatican, we're told in Angelus, they're the church's newspaper. And by the way, go back here and we go right back to, he says, the work of the church. This is the work of the church. What it seeks to do, to draw the attention of mankind as to their duty to care for the planet and people. And if we hear the two-horned beast making those assertions, then we have to realize that he's drinking out of Babylon's chalice. Drinking wine from Babylon's chalice, and it's going to filter down to each one of us. So in the church paper on May 26, 2021 here, Angelus, the Roman Catholic paper, says Vatican launches 7 years Laudato Si action plan. And I shared this part with you before, but in the context of COP26, it's worthy of being repeated. They launch a 7-year Laudato Si action plan. Why 7 years? Very important. An official from the Vatican, Caruth Adam, said the reason for a 7-year plan is based on the biblical significance of the number 7. Now remember the law of the Sabbath, the Pope dealt with the Sabbath day. He dealt with, which is a weekly, every 7th day of each week. He dealt all the way up to the Jubilee. Show that the sabbatical year, every 7 years, and then it went up to the Jubilee, every 7 times 7 years, or 49 years. And so the 49th year, at the end of the 49th year, which is the 50th year, they would have the Jubilee. And so that comprehends the law of the Sabbath, at least as he understood it. But for us as Sabbath keepers, it should awaken us to the reality. And this is a very accurate reminder that as to the importance of these appointed times. because the papacy told us that we change not just the Sabbath day, but every other precept in the Mosaic Law. So they are telling us that the 7-year action plan is based on the biblical significance of the number 7. And notice, and you need to know, this year begins this year, 2021. The 7-year action plan began as of the 25th of May, 2021. It says, year 1, he said, Karuthadam, year 1, he said, will be dedicated to planning through community building, resource sharing, and drafting local action plans. The next 5 years will be dedicated to concrete action. These are the actions coming out of COP26, which will be kicked off on this coming Sunday. Concrete actions. While the last year will be a sabbatical year, which dedicated to praise and thanksgiving, thanking God, he says. So they're launching a 7-year plan that at the end of 7 years they can have a sabbatical, a sort of a jubilee of sorts, a sabbatical year of rest. This is because they're trying to get the land to rest. So remember, the principle of the Sabbath that they see here is that you must have the weekly rest first, then the 7-year rest, then the 49th year rest. They are beginning, this is year 1. This 2021 over to 22, to May of 22, will be the first year of that kickoff. And that goes back to the release of his Laudato encyclical on May 25th, 2015. And so that kind of becomes their bullseye point. So all their years are referenced from the publishing of that encyclical. And so they're telling us now, and in other presentations I've shared with you, how they used 2020, which ended on May 25th, 2021 here, as to close out that framing of the Laudato Si, so we can now begin the official step out into the 7-year cycle, the Sabbatical Cycle. They are not oblivious to this at all. They mention it here, the last year will be a sabbatical year. It goes on. This process can only be achieved through partnership in the spirit of the synodal path to which Pope Francis is inviting the whole of humanity. Karuthadam said, saying the next 7 years will be a synodal journey working together. This is where all the churches are working together in concert with the papacy. Hand in hand, they joyfully walk together. A long time ago, Sister White said, she had a terrible dream. And she was frightened out of her wits because the Seventh-day Adventist Church had morphed into a Roman Catholic procession. In Volume 1 of the Testaments, she said that. She saw that the Seventh-day Adventists had turned into Roman Catholics. And we have to wonder, how and why did this happen? We're going to drill down to see that God has already warned us as to the actions we should take and the things we should see coming forward. And we are standing in good favor and a good doctrinal foundation to have achieved the awareness that the law of the Sabbath is more than the weekly 7th day. That's why today is one of those Sabbath days. Today is the last great day of the Feast of Tabernacles. Here in the Jesuit Review, America Jesuit Review of October 4th, only 3 weeks ago, Pope Francis and 40 faith leaders called for urgent action to combat climate change. Future generations will never forgive us, he said. 40 faith leaders. Now, one of the things I noted here in previous presentations that I share this, you will notice that this is no way to take a representative picture, photograph of people who were gathered. to celebrate such an important event. But notice, you see the pontiff here, and the photographer could have arranged, in fact, I'm sure that this photo was cropped. I didn't do this cropping. If you go to the American Jesuit Review, you will see this photograph. Notice one man is cut in half here. No professional photographer does that. There's a reason for that. There are some people whose photographs they didn't want to reveal to the public. So they slice this picture right there in half. You go to the American Jesuit Review, it's there as is. Exactly. I don't think I can get to it from here. I was trying to see if the link would be activated. So, Seventh-day Adventists were there, for example. And so, I believe the Seventh-day Adventist, Mr. Dion Gagnon, was over to the left-hand side. And in my belief, that's one of the reasons why this picture was cropped. They showed us the ceiling of the church and all sorts of, look at the empty space to the right. Look how much space is here. That means that it's a wide-angle camera. You see that? Look at this spot here. From the right corner of the picture all the way over to where this photographer is. That's a lot of space that you could have included to take the other people over on the left side. Look at this here compared to that portion. So a lot is being left out. And we'll leave that to the masters of deceit. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention, that just this photograph is in itself just a deception, because it's leaving out some of the photographic details. But what they lost for in words, in pictures, they made up some of it in words. In an unprecedented response to the grave threat facing all peoples worldwide from climate change, Pope Francis and some 40 faith leaders representing the world's major religions have joined in an appeal for urgent action, signed today, October 4th, in the Vatican, and addressed to all governments participating in the 26th UN Climate Change Conference, or COP26, in Glasgow, Scotland, from October 31 through November 12th. The appeal calls for decisive international political action to combat climate change and to safeguard, restore, and heal our wounded humanity and the home entrusted to our stewardship. So we're seeing, and interesting that they should use the word heal here. So 40 religious faith leaders representing 84% of the world's population, as they'll tell us later, presented themselves to sign this religious concordance that will be handed over to the international policymakers, all governments participating in Glasgow this coming weekend. So a church document is being handed over to the civil powers to say, this is what we, the church, want you to implement. This is like saddling the beast of Revelation 17. So here we're having the church merging with the state, asking the state, please carry out these church doctrines. Whenever there's a scheme in which the church approaches the state, summoning the state to implement her codes of doctrines, it has always resulted in persecution upon the true worshippers. And they did not have to have 100% of the world's religions there, or 100%. They have 84%. That is an overwhelming majority. And in a world where democracy is the order of the day, then majority rules. 84% is nothing to sniff at. So 84% of the world's religions have already agreed. This is the way we want to go. This is the way we want to be governed. And the minority will just have to evolve, be awakened to this new reality. And you'll notice that they use the word heal here, to safeguard, restore, and heal our wounded. Now, look at these two terms running side by side, heal and wound, and think of Revelation 13, verse 12 and 13. Especially in verse 12 it says, and he causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the beast whose deadly wound was healed. And we see them using this very same phraseology of prophecy. Restore and heal our wounded humanity and our common home. So notice again, humanity, that's people, and the common home, the home entrusted to us, planet. So these two things are working together. The Glasgow Summit aims to accelerate progress toward the goals of the Paris Agreement and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. So accelerate, that means they're ramping up. I mean, they're opening all the stops and going full bore with this one. So the meeting that they're about to have in only a few days is to accelerate the Pope's Paris Climate Agreement, because Paris Agreement was written on the backbone of Laudato Si. Laudato Si is the architecture on which Paris Climate Agreement was written. And I've shared that with us repeatedly. So when the nations are when the churches are appealing to the nations, asking them to enforce Paris Climate Agreement, they're really appealing to the nations to enforce the Pope's Laudato Si encyclical, in the bosom of which Sunday is given a very prominent place. The bosom of that encyclical. The paper went on. The faith leaders represent an estimated 84% of the world's people that identify with the faith and come from the main Christian denominations, the two main branches of Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, Sikhism, Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, Zoroastrianism, and Jainism. Christians present at the signing in the Vatican included Pope Francis, Bartholomew, and it gave through a number of others. They have the Anglicans, represented Muslims, and then we have individuals from the Academy of Sciences in Tehran, Iran. That's a Muslim group. The worldwide Jewish community was represented there. And so the world's largest and most respected faiths came out to Rome. And it's called the Pact of Rome that they signed. The Pact of Rome. All roads led to Rome on the 4th of October. Then they look back. 6 years ago, before the United Nations sponsored climate change conference in Paris in 2015, Pope Francis published the encyclical Laudato Si. That document is widely recognized as having contributed significantly to getting many governments to support the Paris Climate Agreement, in which 195 countries committed to keeping global temperature rises to below 2 degrees Celsius. They're telling us the Pope's encyclical was a prime mover in getting many governments to support the Paris Agreement. They're saying, this is a Jesuit magazine of America saying, these are the Roman Catholics speaking on behalf of the Roman Catholic Pope and Roman Catholic worldview. And said, yeah, it was our document. And now we are trying to ramp it up in 2021 here to really get it on the fast track. Those dialogues culminated with an event this morning in the Vatican Hall of Benedictions, at which each of the faith leaders signed the appeal. Seventh-day Adventists were there. I'll bring that up later. They signed the appeal. After the signing, Pope Francis handed the appeal to the COP26 president delegate. So that he took the church document and said, here's the authority. We want the rest of 196 plus yourself make 197, 196 plus world leaders who will be at Glasgow. And let them know this is coming from 84% of the world. This is what we want. And this is what they'll get. They will get what they've asked for. Where do we stand as commandment keepers? We should be raising an alarm at the highest levels, letting people know what is really at stake. So I want you to know that the Paris Climate Agreement, COP26, and the virus and its vaccine are all linked. This is one scheme that the enemy is pulling off to compel the whole world into worshiping after the dictates of the Pope of Rome. This afternoon, I will share with you part of a video of a school teacher and some others who were called in in preparation for their termination in New York City. They were called in, and this lady, the Seventh-day Adventist, was speaking. She said, they rejected my religious appeal because they said, in the meeting, they said, the Pope has already said that this is a moral matter, and the vaccine is an appropriate defense on behalf of public good or common good. I will allow her to say it in her own words and some more details. It will run for about 25 minutes. So I'll share that later. But this lends the framework for that. But it is important to see, it says, after signing, Pope Francis, the chief administrator, master of ceremony, if you will, handed the appeal to the COP26 president delegate, Alok Sharma, from the United Kingdom, and they happen to be the ones who are hosting the UN conference on climate change in COP26. Then it says, COP26 in Glasgow represents an urgent summons to provide effective responses to the unprecedented ecological crisis and the crisis of values that we are presently experiencing. And in this way, to offer concrete hope to future generations, Pope Francis wrote. We want to accompany it with our commitment and our spiritual closeness. You know, when you see spiritual closeness, you think of fraternity, from which we get his second encyclical called Fratelli Tutti, means brothers are we. So the brothers in crime, the brothers in partnership, came together in October 4th and signed an agreement that was written by Rome. They didn't write that agreement. They were invited to Rome to come read this agreement, this document that's written by the Vatican. They signed it, and it's a letter from the Vatican as a chief church, the letter from the Vatican with the support of the apostate children of Rome going to the leaders of the world. This is what the Pope of Rome, the Roman Catholic Church, and all the other churches have agreed to. So when it comes to enforcing these mandates upon a minority of people, it won't be difficult for the governments to make their decision. And what you'll see in the video later on this evening, you'll see that they have already accepted the Pope's decision as authoritative on behalf of all Christians, because the Pope becomes the voice of the Christian church today. He has been so elevated. Today's gathering, the pontiff continues, today's gathering, which brings together many cultures and spiritualities in a spirit of fraternity, can only strengthen our realization that we are members of one human family. Each of us has his or her religious beliefs and spiritual traditions. Watch now. We have our uniqueness. You Seventh-day Adventists over there, you believe one way, you believe in the sanctuary and believe Saturday is the Sabbath and so on. And you Pentecostals over there, you believe in another thing. You Jews, you believe another way. And the Muslims and all the others. Let's lay aside our religious differences. This is what the Pope is saying. Let's lay aside. That's why he mentions here, each of us has his or her religious beliefs and spiritual traditions. But no cultural, political, or social borders or barriers prevent us from standing together, he wrote. What a powerful statement. Sister White said, this is what they say. Lay aside the distinguishing differences and let's come together in those points on which we have agreement and enforce decisions that are hostile to liberty. And the Pope is saying the very same thing that we have known for years and years as Seventh-day Adventists. Let me read it in the voice of what this is saying. This sentence again. Each of us has his or her religious beliefs and spiritual traditions, but no cultural, no political, or social borders or barriers will prevent us from standing together. That's the sense. He continues to illumine and direct this openness. Let us commit ourselves to a future shaped by interdependence and co-responsibility. So he has already spoken for religious beliefs and said that's a back burner issue. We cannot use our distinctive religious convictions when we're working on behalf of a common good for humanity. Religious uniqueness must be laid aside. They made the argument, and we have been saying this for years as Seventh-day Adventists. Pope continues, our faiths and spiritualities teach a duty to care for the human family and for the environment in which it lives, said the document. We, the churches included with the Vatican, we are deeply interdependent with each other and with the natural world. We are not limitless masters of our planet and its resources. Future generations will never forgive us, and he went on. More than 100 heads of state are slated to attend COP26. You'll see even the Queen is supposed to be there. A few days ago she fell sick and she thought she would not be there. And I checked this morning and she said she's fighting to be ready. Fighting to be ready, just trying to be up enough to go to COP. Because that's her, agreement with destiny. She needs, and perhaps Queen Elizabeth II is the most influential woman in the world today, and maybe most respected of all the queens of England in a long time. And she has been around for many, many years. And she is carrying, Britain, you see, is hosting COP26 this year. And the voice of the Queen, ceremonial as it is, carries a heavy punch, ceremonial punch. It shows the traditional values of the fabric and the structure of the British economy, the British government, British Empire stands behind this decision that the government is going into. And you remember a few weeks ago, Boris Johnson came to visit with President Joe Biden to shore him up on these things, on the COP26. And over and beyond that, tomorrow, the 29th of October, Joe Biden will be sitting in front of the Pope to get his talking points. What he must tell the World Congress at COP26, how the United States will chart its way forward. So in Revelation 13, the two-horned beast was to make an image to the healed beast and cause the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the healed beast. How is he going to do it? How will the two-horned beast, is he going to do it in a vacuum? Or is he going to have close collaboration with the beast system after it's been healed? That's what we're seeing. There has to be close collaboration with the head of the United States and the beast power when that system is healed. We've been told a long time ago, when the number 666 is made up, we will understand it. We don't have to worry about vicarious filiae and all these other titles and numbers that when permutated one way or another, you come up with 666. Because you can do that for all sorts of entities in the past and in the present. It's not a unique number to any one person, and the Pope's title really is not vicarious filiae. And though that number is washed over with the number 666, it is not the man who stands at the head of the two-horned beast country. And this is another misconception. So when the Pope is pushing his agenda and America is working in support while people are looking at the papacy, God says to look at the two-horned beast. But they're busy looking at the papacy and not seeing the two-horned beast, which is the arm, the hidden hand that the papacy is working through right now. So when Biden goes before the president, Biden goes before the Pope, that's the hidden hand. He gets his manifesto, his manuscript. His talking points are not Biden's. It's not the American electorate that is speaking. It is a voice of the Church of Rome that is speaking through the two-horned beast. And he's going to engineer a system like that which ensued in the Dark Ages before the beast was wounded. Now, it goes on. America, that's a magazine, the Jesuit magazine, America has learned from Vatican sources that prior to his visit to COP26, Pope Francis will receive U.S. President Joseph R. Biden Jr. in a private audience in the Vatican's Apostolic Palace on October 29th. That's tomorrow. President Biden will be in Italy to attend, watch now, the G20 Summit of Heads of State in Rome on October 30th to 31. So the G20 nations are the top wealthiest economies in the world. Biden is supposed to meet with them on on Sabbath, the rest of Sabbath, then on Sunday. And later on Sunday, they will all fly over to Glasgow to have their opening ceremony of COP26. That's the 31st. So we're in the nick of time when these events should go down. Why is Joe Biden meeting privately with the Pope and not all the other heads of state meeting privately with the Pope? Because you see, the United States has an economic and moral clout to lead the world in this regard. And so they're looking to the United States for leadership. This was a problem with Trump. He didn't want to be a part of this pact. So he pulled the United States out of the Paris Agreement. And he and the Pope could not get along. That was the main thrust that did him in. And those of you out there, you can hear the rain falling. It's very heavy raining here. So please bear with the audio quality. I hope it's coming through clearly. So that was what did Trump in. One of the main things, because he did not play ball with the Paris Climate Agreement, as the world now knows. So later on October 9th of 2021, the same Jesuit paper gives us an update that not only would President Trump meet with the Pope in private sessions, but also the Speaker of the House of Congress would meet with the Pope in private session as well. And she has already met with the Pope of Rome. Notice here, on October 9th, Pope Francis receives Speaker Nancy Pelosi in private audience. So says the Jesuit magazine. What did they talk about? What commitments did Nancy make? Now, and I've said this before, but it's worthy of being said right now, that the United States is built upon a tripartite governmental structure made up of the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judiciary branch. And all three are independent branches of government. And that was to get away from a sort of dictatorship where the president or the court or the Congress can make unilateral rule over the country. But it creates a sort of checks and balances against runaway government control. And never in the history of the United States has there been a time when the Roman Catholic Church has so subverted the course of justice as to insert herself as a dominant player in all the branches of government as she has today. And for the first time in America's history, we have all three branches of government under the supreme control of the Roman Catholic Church at a time when the first Jesuit Pope has been elected to the office of the papacy. Think about that. So, Joe Biden is only the second Roman Catholic to have earned the title of President of the United States. Only the second. Then Nancy Pelosi, so he's a very committed son of the Church of Rome. If anyone doesn't know that, just fan through and ask Google, when Beau Biden died, who was a pastor to console Joe Biden in his grief? That was Pastor Pope Francis I. And so Biden has a sort of soft spot in his heart for the Pope, because the Pope was so kind to visit with him and console him when his son died. And nothing like when someone individually comes to you at a time of loss. The Pope, when he came here to speak to both houses of Congress, Satan orchestrated it, that Biden's son died at that time, and he was given the mantle of blessing so that in the future he can return the favor. And he promises to return it elegantly. Not a word to be removed from its setting. So Nancy, on the other hand, is equally committed to the philosophies of the Roman Catholic Church in general, and Pope Francis in particular, the philosophies of climate change. So let's see what they talked about and her commitments to the Church of Rome. The paper says, Pope Francis received Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, in a private audience in the Vatican Apostolic Palace on the morning of October 9th. The Vatican announced that this at midday after the meeting had taken place. Ms. Pelosi is the third high-level U.S. official to be received in the audience by Pope Francis and senior Vatican officials this year, after John Kerry, the Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, on May 15th, and Anthony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, on June 28th. So the Pope has been making rounds with the highest levels of U.S. officials in executive offices. These are the key players in Biden's cabinet. He said the third high-level U.S. official. This is Biden's cabinet. So they're all speaking with one voice with the papacy here. Notice Kerry and then Blinken, Secretary of State. You know, Secretary of State is like the most prestigious official of a country that would go abroad and to the president. That's the president's personal secretary, the Secretary of State. And the word secretary means secret bearer. He knows all the secrets of the state. That's what the secretary does. Keep secrets. And they keep the secrets of the state. They know all the inner workings of the secrets of the state. That's why Kerry gave, for example, he gave Israel's battle plans over to Iran, because he had the secrets of the state. Now watch the Catholics boasting and bragging. Like President Joseph Biden Jr. and Mr. Kerry, Speaker Pelosi is Catholic. They're just gloating. Because the Jesuits gloating. We've got it covered. They're giving high fives to each other. Like Joe Biden and John Kerry, who is a special envoy in climate, Speaker Pelosi, who is third in line to the presidency. These are all Roman Catholics. She was in Rome for the Interplanetary Interparliamentary Preparatory Meeting for the UN-sponsored COP26 meeting in Glasgow, UK. So this is where we're headed. She was there to support the Glasgow COP26 mission on climate change, which a Pope was due to address on October 9th. Remember, this paper was written on October 9th for that event that went down on October 9th. So this is very current news at that time. Now, watch when they met. A woman never shakes a man's hand like this. Look at this handshake. You see Nancy here. In the smaller picture to the left, you can see the thumb squeezing between the index finger and the ring finger. And I enlarged it on the right here that you can see that. And you can see this is a symbolic handshake. This is a Jesuit Freemasonry handshake. See, they squeeze each other with the thumb between the two fingers. We've got, the deal is closed. The deal is closed. So they had that grip of a handshake there. And a woman never shakes a man's hand like that. And if you look on the video, and let me see if I can run the video here, that's how that went. That's what resulted in this here. She was actually giving obeisance to the Pope of Rome because she went there to carry the deal. Whatever she gave to him was, you notice, the Democrats control both houses of Congress and the presidency. So they don't have to consult the Republicans for anything, necessarily. And Nancy Pelosi took something to the Pope, some type of commitment. And so will Biden also, and receive his mandates, of course. And they will not tell us everything, but we are students of prophecy. And we can read between the lines and see around the corner, because we can see where these things are tending. So People magazine continues. This is Monday, October 11th, 2021. Nancy Pelosi tells Pope Francis during emotional visit, "You overwhelm me." Nancy Pelosi shared an emotional moment with Pope Francis during a weekend visit she called a spiritual, personal, and official honor. The House Speaker, who is a devout Catholic, did anybody wonder about that? Wonder no more. The House Speaker, who is a devout Catholic, told the leader of her faith, "You overwhelm me," as she took a seat before him at the Vatican on Saturday. That was the 9th. Then she speaks now. Watch the voice. "His Holiness's leadership is a source of joy and hope for Catholics and for all people, challenging each of us to be good stewards of God's creation, planet." Remember, she said all people here. So watch the same code language. All people, God's creation. To act on climate, to embrace the refugee, the immigrant, and the poor, and to recognize the dignity and diversity in everyone, Pelosi said in the statement. Now, when you see immigrants and consider like something like the immigrant crisis that America is going through, the self-made immigration crisis at the southern border, you can understand why. Because this is a part of the Roman Catholic social teaching about caring for the poor. You just open your borders and bring everyone in from everywhere, and it's a big social compact. If you search in the internet, called the social teaching of the Catholic Church, you will see why there's an immigration crisis in almost every country in the world. It's not just America. The immigration problem is a global problem. Not just here in the United States, lest you might think otherwise. Then she said, "His Holiness commands our attention to honor the gospel of Matthew," Pelosi 81 continued, "by serving the least of these, lifting up those who have been left out or left behind, especially in the time of COVID." She said more. Following their meeting, Pope Francis called on lawmakers around the world to come together to address climate change. So, calling on lawmakers now, the churchman, calling on the state to implement the climate crisis. And who has the manuscript to speak to the world. Joe Biden is getting it tomorrow. That's the Pope's manuscript. Just like the church had signed, the 40 churches signed off their commitments, and you would think, oh, this is what all the churches came together and agreed upon. Well, they agreed that they're going to sign what the Pope wrote down. But if it's the Pope's manuscript, they're making an image to the beast. That image has been formed, my brethren. The image has been formed. It's just time for it to be executed, to be implemented. The image, we cannot look for the image of the beast formation in the future. That's something of the past right now. The image is fast formed, past being formed. We're just waiting for it to speak with a dragon voice. And you know, and I've said this before, and it's worthy of saying again, because many times we think that it's a two-horned beast alone that is to speak like a dragon. But all the countries of the world who drink of the chalice, Babylon's chalice, they're going to bark the same bark. The bark is a dragon's voice. The breath of the dragon. Remember, this is a 13-part series now that we've been looking at called The Breath of the Dragon. To meet this challenge, everyone has a role to play. Francis 84 told leaders Saturday during a meeting. So, Pelosi said she shared her gratitude for the immense moral clarity and urgency that His Holiness continues to bring to the climate crisis. Did she flinch on this? They couldn't get that out of Trump. They got it out of Biden and the others who joined with it. But this has been a real, we can see the hand of God in such a movement. And whenever I mention President Trump's name, I have to always say, take off your political and emotional hats and try to understand the prophecy in the context of what we're looking on. That America came to this moment in 2015. This very moment where we are, America came to that moment. And in 2017, Donald Trump pulled the United States out of the agreement and said, no, we're not going down this road. That is like what Sister White saw in her writings, page 38. Says, I saw that the angels were about to let loose of the wind. And Jesus raised his lovely hand and said, hold, my blood, Father, my blood. And so that should be an indicator to all of us that we're at the critical pass. If we had understood what's in Laudato Si and realized that this is a front face of a Sunday legislation, then we'd recognize the urgency of the moment in which we live. And this is a very desperate moment, as now we're living in the era of mandates. And these mandates are coming fast and furious. And after January 1st is my estimation at the farthest reach. But why January 1st is because most new laws go into effect on the 1st of January. But after COP26 closes its session on November 12th, we should be looking forward to rapid sanctions as grievous as the mandates for the vaccine. These two mandates will be running in parallel. Mandates for the vaccine and mandates for the climate. I'll show you later on, too, how they're already planning climate lockdowns. Lockdowns for climate change. So that we've seen the no movement days. To lockdowns so that the human inaction will cause the planet to start healing itself. And these lockdowns are going to be geared around Sunday. These no movement days. We covered this in the past. Speaking of Pelosi, it says her meeting comes before President Joe Biden, who is also Catholic. They're boasting. Who is also Catholic, is scheduled to meet with Francis for the first time since he took office. But now, I mentioned two branches out of three that are owned by the Catholic Church. But John Roberts is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. He's a Jesuit. Neil Gorsuch, he's a Jesuit. Kavanaugh, he's a Jesuit. Amy Coney Barrett, she's a Jesuit. Sotomayor, she's a Jesuit. 7 out of the 9 Supreme Court members, they're women who are Jesuits too. Don't think that Jesuits just come in male figures. Catholics are smarter than that. That's why Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she's a Jesuit priestess. They give them a different title, but they come under the branch. Jesuit. And in this little book here, COVID-19, the rest of the story, you'll see that they're women Jesuits. They give them a name. I don't remember the name that he said they have. He has really gone into looking at all of these. But, yep, there are women who populate the Jesuit order. Just like you have nuns, you have priests and nuns. So the women are called a different name, but they're Jesuits nevertheless. And here, so what about the Seventh-day Adventist Church? In this paper, Advent Messenger of April 19, 2021, it shows that the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and they provide very accurate annotation, footnotes, to sustain this. So Climate Sunday the headline says, while the UK's largest ecumenical initiative will host the National Sunday Climate event ahead of COP26, Adventists will enjoy an observer status. Now let me just tell you what an observer is. The observer status that the Seventh-day Adventist Church has taken is not to go to investigate what is happening and then come back to tell us what is really happening. Because they have been having observer status from about 1975, and they have never told us anything that's going on behind closed doors. We had to find out that the church became a part of the World Council of Churches, and then it came back, oh no, we're there as observers. But they never told us what they observed. That's a dumb dog. Then they go back, they're now a part of the G20 nations, the churches in the G20. And we're observers, but they never tell us. They say, no, there's no Sunday law in pipeline. That's what they come back to tell us. That's not an observer who is faithful. That's a dumb dog that will not bark. And it comes to the climate change accords, to advance, a Laudato Si. And they say, we're observers, but they're no observers. They're participants. They're accomplices in the crime. Otherwise, you would hear these things preached from the Seventh-day Adventist pulpits and see it in our magazines on a regular basis, but it's woefully absent. Tells you that the observer status is a sham. So when we find out about it and say, oh, the Seventh-day Adventists had representations of observers, it sounds like they're not participants in it. But we're smarter than that. God has given us eyes to see and a brain to analyze. Now here's Climate Sunday is an ecumenical initiative in the UK that is calling on churches to conduct climate-focused services on Sunday. Why the UK? Because the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26, will be held in the UK. That is why Climate Sunday is being organized by churches together in Britain and Ireland. CBTI, and I'll show you from CBTI shortly. One of the largest ecumenical organizations in England, Scotland, Wales, and Ireland in anticipation of the COP26 movement is the CBTI group. It goes on. Anglicans, Baptists, Roman Catholics, Lutherans, Methodists, Orthodox, Pentecostals, Evangelicals are all involved in this Climate Sunday Initiative organization by the CTBI. Seventh-day Adventists are no strangers to these developments. The Seventh-day Adventist Church in Great Britain and Ireland serve as observers within the CTBI. In fact, the British Union of Seventh-day Adventists sends 2 representatives to attend the annual national meetings of the CTBI. Really? You have 2 representatives. They're not board members. They're just representatives. That's what they told us. They've always told. We're just observers. Why is it that these observers can't tell us about Climate Sunday? Climate Sunday is an initiative to push the climate change agenda and give the world a Sunday Sabbath day of rest. And the Adventist observers, as dumb dogs that would not bark, have been muted. They are no observers. They're accomplices in the crime. I showed you the photograph that they sliced off because they didn't want us to see Ganyu Diop, who is the Seventh-day Adventist General Conference level representation at these events. It goes on. Goal 3 of the Climate Sunday Ecumenical Initiative is to create a national Climate Sunday event to call on political leaders to act on the climate crisis ahead of 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP26. So let's see what they're this year. Speak up. This is from their own words. Speak up, join with other churches and wider society by adding its voice or your name to a common call for the UK government to take much bolder action on climate change in this country in advance of COP26, and to strengthen its credibility to lead the international community to adopt a step change in action at COP26. Now, when you say a step change, say there are 2 types of changes you can have. Those of you who have done some of the background in the sciences, they speak of a step change, or you can have a ramp change. The ramp, just like a ramp, the ramp is easy, like a ramp for a little trolley or somebody with a wheelchair access, they can go up a ramp, and it's a gentle incline. You go up easily. But a step, you have to make a vertical rise, then go one elevation, and then another step to the next elevation in sudden bursts. So they're not asking for a ramp change. A ramp is a gradual incline, gradual slope like a triangle. If you see a triangle and you go up, make it a great slope there. Or like a wedge, you have a little wedge you put to align things. But the step function is making a very significant change. And this is what they're asking for. So, to strengthen its credibility, to lead the international community to adopt a step change in action at COP26. The culmination of the campaign will be a National Climate Sunday event on Sunday, 5th September 2021, to share church commitments and pray for bold action and courageous leadership at COP26. All of this, Climate Sunday, Seventh-day Adventists are wrapped in the woof of it. And they come back and tell us, there's no Sunday law in the pipeline. That's what the observer status told them to say. No Sunday law is in the pipeline. And you know who said that? The president of the World Church of Seventh-day Adventists, Head N.C. Wilson. No Sunday law in the pipeline. On October 3rd, Writers' News Service had this report. Vatican hopes its pre-COP26 climate event will raise stakes in Glasgow. The Vatican hopes a meeting where world religious leaders will take a common stand on the environment can raise ambitions. That's a step change. Raise ambitions on what can be achieved at next month's UN Climate Change Conference, its foreign minister says. Monday's day-long event, organized by the Vatican, the United Kingdom, and Italy, brings together about 40 faith leaders of the world's major religions and scientists from about 20 countries. This is a G20 meeting that I shared with you earlier. And you see the number of 40 faiths here. So it's the same group that we're looking for. And the Adventists were there, but they were there as observers. But they haven't said a word about their inking the paper. They are just observing. And they're not even telling us about Climate Sunday. Search the Adventist literature for Climate Sunday. Only independent ministries will shout this out there. But the General Conference, no, there's no Sunday law in pipeline. Nothing to worry about. Go on sleeping. It says the leaders, including Pope Francis, will sign a joint appeal and hand it to Italian Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio and Britain's Alok Sharma, and I showed this earlier, president of the UN gathering known as COP26 in Glasgow. So they telegraphed what they were going to do, and now this is history. What we're reading here of October 3rd, we saw that this was accomplished on October 4th. It is our hope that October 4th is Monday. It is our hope that the meeting of October 4th will give an impact to opinion in general but within our faith groups and faith families, and also within the political community, to raise ambitions with regards to what can be achieved by COP26. So we have the churches joining with the political community. So the faith community joining with the political community to make mandates as to what's achievable in COP26. So the meeting that they're going to have over the next 2 weeks, the COP26 meeting, is to dramatically change the life of every human being on this planet, up to and including the way we worship. And I've shown you the Climate Sun initiatives before, and it's mentioned here as well, the Advent Messenger I just read from. Look at this backdrop. This is from Reuters News Service. Francis strongly supports the goals of the 2015 U.S. Paris Accord to reduce global warming. Over the weekend, he told young people that theirs was perhaps the last generation to save the planet. So, do you think the Pope would disagree with the goals of the Paris Climate Accords? That was his brainchild. The Paris Climate Agreement is a brainchild of the papacy. Here's a statement from the pen of Ellen G. White. Story of Redemption, page 381, paragraph 2. By this first beast, the two-horned, the leopard-like, by this first beast is represented the Roman Church, an ecclesiastical body clothed with civil power, having authority to punish all dissenters. The image to the beast represents another religious body, clothed with similar powers. This is not the Roman Catholic Church. So as much as we've been giving emphasis on the Roman Catholic Church, the two-horned beast is to make an image to what the Roman Catholic Church has done. The image to the beast represents another religious body clothed with similar powers. Really, it's dragon powers. The formation of this image is the work of that beast whose peaceful rise and mild professions render it so striking a symbol of the United States. Here is to be found an image of the papacy. Here where? The United States. Here. In the United States. Here is to be found an image of the papacy. So when Joe Biden goes to meet with the Pope in private conference and gets the manifesto from the Vatican to share with the world, in this regard, the United States is forming an image to the papacy, because that was not just a voice of the Pope. It's a voice of the Pope and all the churches. I showed you. There are 40 churches who joined with them, representing 84% of the global population. So it's a church and state document that's coming under the guise of the United States. When the churches of our land, she says, when the churches of our land, uniting upon such points of faith as are held by them in common, shall influence the state to enforce their decrees and sustain their institutions, then will Protestant America have formed an image of the Roman hierarchy. So let me ask you the question. Have the leading churches of the United States united upon points of faith shared by them in common, their religious distinctiveness notwithstanding, and have agreed to influence the state at COP26 to enforce their decrees? We've seen this. We've made that case. The leading churches of America, including the Seventh-day Adventists, have already signed to the Pact of Rome. So the image is formed. It's now for it to speak. And where do we stand? And I shared with you in the next few moments, I'll talk about Agenda 21. In our previous discussions about Agenda 21, I showed you how the years 2023 and 2025 are very important to the carrying out of this agenda. 2023 is only 2 years from now. And the climate activist, I shared a video with him. What's his name? Al Gore. He made it very clear that the only thing that was standing between the world and the implementation of their goals was a man who was sitting in the White House at the time. Not my words, his. And so, now that that man who was sitting in the White House at that time is no longer the man who is sitting there today, it's full throttle. And there, at full throttle, as you can see, we need to accelerate this movement toward climate convergence. But in so doing, we can see that it appeals to a Sunday legislation. She continues on page 282 of the same book. The beast with lamb-like horns commands all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell save he that hath a mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. I want to pause there. So notice, in ramp up to the mark of the beast system, there are preliminaries in Revelation 13 that we need to observe. We saw that first, and not necessarily in this order, but we saw how he will cause the earth and them which dwell therein to worship. We also saw that there was a deception. And I shared with you, by the miracles which he had power to do on the side of the beast, he deceived the earth. And I showed you that the deception included pharmacology, Revelation 18 verse 23, with the sorceries with which they deceive the whole world. So there is a health component that's tied into the mark in the framework leading up to the image of the beast enforcement. We have a climate, people and planets. We have the deception through pharmacology, followed by the enforcement of worship. So those who are waiting to see enforcement of worship before they say, oh yes, that's the mark of the beast, it will be too late. You've already passed 2 gates. You're inside the dragon's parlor and not knowing it. And this is where we are today. So we are seeing that people and planets being concerned, the theology to enforce Climate Sunday, that will come after. Then we see the health care with the poison, the vaccine. And so the last thing is for them to bring in the Sunday movement. But in addition to that, there are other factors. The religious right seeks to get some initiatives, some scores settled. There's the religious right. These are the Republican side of the aisle. They're looking for sanctity of the home, sanctity of the marriage. That means a marriage is an act between one man and one woman. Then sanctity of the womb. Get rid of Roe versus Wade. By the way, the U.S. Supreme Court will be hearing the Roe versus Wade conversation in November, within the next coming month here. And Amy Barrett and all the Catholics in the court have already given strong opinions against that system. And then lastly, they want to have sanctity of the Lord's Day. Keep Sunday sacred. Make America one nation under God again. You'll hear this strongly from the religious right. And so in this regard, both sides of the aisle are working toward. They might not agree philosophically on the political parties, but the underlying theological accomplishments and common good accomplishments, they are all in agreement on. The Republicans will take a slower step to get to the Sunday legislation because they would not enforce the Laudato, but the Democrats are like the best actors in the ring, and they are running with the ball very fast to the finishing line. She continues, this is a mark concerning which the third angel utters his voice. It is a mark of the first beast, or the papacy, and is therefore to be sought among the distinguishing characteristics of that power. Are we seeing any distinguishing characteristics of the papal power as an undertone in these climate initiatives and even the vaccine mandates? Yes. And what I will share with you this afternoon is that the Catholic Church, the state of New York, told this Seventh-day Adventist, we can't hire you anymore because the Pope has already said that this is a moral decision, a moral issue, and so we are obedient to the Pope. We're listening to the voice of the Pope. She continues. The prophet Daniel declares that the Roman Church, symbolized by the little horn, was to think to change times and laws, while Paul styled it the man of sin, the Thessalonians, who was to exalt himself above God. Only by changing God's law could the papacy exalt itself above God. Whoever should understandingly keep the law as thus changed would be giving supreme honor to the power by which the change was made. This is why we're giving out the book, The Great Controversy, at this time, and helping people to come to an awareness of where we are. As for us, present truth believers, as we wind down, if we are still in the city, we should be actively making plans to get into the countrysides, and where we can be interdependent, we can help each other. Because the problem with buying and selling, she told us, will be a very serious one in the near future. That was from 1904 when she made that statement. So my encouragement to us is that we need to rally our forces together and see where we acquire territory in places that are conducive to agriculture, because there's a supply chain shortage that is looming around the corner. I spoke about this a lot in many of the previous presentations. And if you open your web browser, you can see, just type in supply chain, it's all over. It's no longer if it's going to happen. They're expecting that this winter is going to be the coldest since 1795. And they're expecting an energy crisis in the heart of the coldest winter, perhaps on record for the United States. That at least their forecast this to be a significantly cold winter. We are in an energy crisis right now, all sorts of shortages. And so it tells us just how close we are. And no amount of stockpiling, of course, will allow us to avoid this system. We need a stockpile of faith in the promises of God. I think when we see these things, we know that our redemption draws near. The kingdom is in reach. And so it demands of us the perfect characters in the fear of God. At this time above all, we need to sound the alarm. Battle cry, see the foe is nigh. Raise the standard high for the Lord. Because soon and very soon, our liberties will all be gone. I shared in passing, and maybe in one of the previous presentations, even these religious exemptions that we write and give to people, and it helps them out now, will not necessarily be there, will not necessarily hold over the long term. And they won't hold over the long term, because they will condemn the people who have these exemptions as the ones driving, who are fanning the pandemic. And as a result, they will put severe pressure on them to be vaccinated. And our earthly support will be cut off. Many people have lost their jobs already. And your employment is your earthly support. And when they stop you from even going to Walmart or any of the grocery stores, then you're cut off. You cannot buy or sell unless. So the buying and selling is not just restricted to Sunday sacredness, because Sunday really, if you're keeping Sunday whole, you can decide, okay, I'm not going to do any shopping on Sunday and survive out the market to be system. But if it is a system where you have to conform to, let's say, the vaccine mandates, in order to go to the store to get gasoline and buy car insurance and get your license renewed. Then you're being cut off from all the supply chains of the earth, just being severed from the earth. And sooner or later, we will be looked upon as those who create or causing the earth to mourn, just like they will be blamed, the unvaccinated are fanning the pandemic. It's those who are unvaccinated and nonconformists who are causing climate change. The same argument will be made. And inspiration told us that. Because they're not keeping the climate Sabbath, they're causing the earth to mourn and to groan and to languish. And it's better for one or a few people to die than a whole world to perish. And so death's decree will come upon us all over the world. And I thank God for the prospect of the kingdom, because it is such a time as this when Michael will stand up to deliver his saints. Everyone whose names are found written, in his book. So it is my prayer, my brethren, my encouragement to us all, stay the course and to ramp up our preparation, our suitcases, our spiritual suitcases in every way, so that when the crisis moment comes, it will not take us by surprise and we'll be fortified. I say to people, it's not enough just to talk about these things and plan about what we will do later on. These things have to be happening now, because as we can see, they're happening now. They're happening now. Just in the interest of those who are online, and I know many brethren are at work, those who are not observing the time as sacred, and so I will pause here at this point, and we can discuss offline, and let me, in all fairness, let's just close in prayer, and then we take in a Q&A from the audience here or anywhere online, and then we will close. Let's pray. Loving Father, we thank you for the time we've spent looking into your word. And we look forward to the day when you will relieve us from the burdens of life and transport us into your glorious kingdom. Lord, when you come, you're coming for perfected characters. We ask you to fortify us now, to perfect characters before you, and to have the faith and the wisdom to make the necessary preparations for that which is coming upon the earth. You warned us of these days, O Lord, in your word. And here they are. And we are not blinded to their realities. And ask that you teach us how to plan best for them and how to be adequately fortified, how to awaken the rest of your people to come to this climactic understanding that the time of delay has passed and action time is now. And what we do quickly, because the dragon is doing his work and he's executing through his leadership. And Lord, we pray that you gather together the 7,000 who have not bowed the knee to Baal. Help us to be united in the present truth, to carry forth this mighty message, impacting our families, your church, or communities. Because, Lord, the decision will be brought upon everyone. And while the justice for the world lays a little longer, may we not overlook or neglect anyone with whom we come in contact. We pray for your church, who is languishing at this time in a total backslidden and beheaded condition. We're asking, O God, that those whose ears are open to your voice will heed the warning call now as we go forth and be ready for the time when Michael should stand up. Bless us to the remainder of the day, and we thank you now. In Jesus' name, Yeshua, our King. Amen.